Okay, good morning. This is Graham Brown. I'm joined here today by two prominent bloggers, Mike Butcher and Helen Keegan, on the South Bank of London on a very chilly but beautiful October morning. This morning we're here to talk about blogging and why you do it. Let's start off with the basic question. Why do you blog? Let's start with you, Mike.
Well, first of all, TechCrunch UK is a commercial publishing venture, so it's designed to bring in revenues through advertising, events. So it's not just I'm just not blogging just for the hell of it. It's actually a full-blown publishing venture. But secondly, the main reason that I got into blogging was that it's basically really the newest form of online publishing that there is. Now, it may not be new necessarily in 2007, but about 4 or 5 years ago it was new, and it's basically about fast, free-form writing that is both journalism and transmission. And what I mean by that is it can be both stories, real sort of journalistically researched stories, and also just transmission. This is something interesting, here's a link, this is what's going on, that kind of thing. So blogging, I think, is really the media for the 21st century.
Let's move over to you, Helen, Techno Kitten.
Yep.
You're not a full-time blogger, are you? You use it to support your other activities. So why do you blog?
Well, I started it as an experiment, really, because when blogging first started a few years ago, a friend of mine started blogging, and he was going on and on about it, saying, you know, it's the next big thing, and you really ought to do it. And okay, well, I'll better try it. And suddenly people started commenting and emailing me. It's like, oh, I'm getting feedback. People are really reading this. And the other aspect of blogging, which is, I suppose, why it became quite addictive for me, it's, I work very often on my own from home. So very often I'll blog about something that in an office environment I might have pointed out to the person sitting next to me. But instead I use it as a piece for the blog. And it's kind of a brain dump, it's a kind of a directory of my thoughts, it's a collection of case studies and a diary of what's happening. And I also use it to write about my own life. And I think that's one of the reasons why I do get traffic to my blog, because people are at least as interested in what I get up to at the evenings and weekends as they are in what I write about mobile.
What is the message in there for marketers and PR departments about using blogs? Because in a way their traditional approach to press releases and how they may take a blog now and use it as another channel for a press release, you're kind of implying that maybe that won't work, and they've got to take a bit of humble pie here and maybe approach it in a different way and be a bit more honest.
They can post a press release on a blog as well, but they've got to do other things.
Well, I also think it's about letting people be honest about what they do for a living and allow them to write about it, because I think the challenge for some bloggers in corporates, certainly a few years ago there were a couple of kind of high profile people lost their jobs because they were found out on their blogs and because they'd been critical of the companies they were working for. But because there is now no real kind of divide between work and home life, I think that as an attitude has to change. And I think Web 2.0 is more about an attitude to business and to running your life than anything to do with the technology.
So can that be manufactured? Could you say, let's say, within your boardroom, say, right, we need a Scoble in our company, it's going to be this guy in the tech department. Is that possible, or is it something that's just got to happen? You mentioned the word organically, that you really can't, you can maybe foster it, but you can't force it.
I don't think you can force it. There are companies out there, certainly in the mobile space, large companies who are actively employing bloggers to write blogs for that company and keep track of what other people are writing and engage in that kind of online community. The challenge is, it was interesting, friends of mine went for a job at one of these companies, and he is a fairly prolific blogger over in the US, and the HR department asked him for examples of his writing. It's like, well, I've given you the links to my blogs, well, can you print something off and bring it in with you? And that shows that there needs to be a fundamental attitudinal change. And that's a challenge, because these executives are really busy doing the stuff they're already doing, so to get them to try and start following and understanding RSS feeds, following a few blogs and maybe getting involved, it's just nigh on impossible. It's not going to happen. So it's going to take a little while for it to filter through, because it's coming from the ground up rather than top down.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit now about microblogging, because I'm sure it's a subject that you want to talk about. Jaiku, Twitter, I mean, what the hell is all this about? Please explain.
It's been going on for a while, because there's loads of us on MSN. I don't know how many millions of customers use MSN, And it's really an extension of that status line on MSN that you can just put anything you like there. Whether it's what you're listening to at the time or how you're feeling or just nothing. And Twitter really is an extension of that.
The recent announcements in the press has been that the acquisition of Jaiku by Google. Now obviously they sense there's some commercial angle there. And you've talked about the fact that microblogging might be more mainstream than blogging. So what exactly are you talking about?
Well, basically, blogging it's very hard to do. Basically, you have to get at the beginning. Certainly at the beginning, you had to get some server space, upload some software, blah blah blah, and then Blogger came along and made it much easier to do a blog spot, etc., etc., etc. But things like Facebook have really made it a much more mass market proposition to a blog or to create status and to create content. And so the microblog, just what you're doing, literally in 140 characters, is much more mainstream. And so Twitter, Jaiku is going to mainstream all of that fairly shortly. And now that Google has bought Jaiku, that's going to become a mainstream aspect of Google as well. Now commercializing it is all about heading towards a place where you say what you're doing, or you're having a conversation with friends via these channels, these micro channels, but that's creating content for Google to target advertising on, whether it's location, whether it's what you're doing, the keywords that you're mentioning in your Jaiku or your Twitter, all of those things, and that's where all of that is coming from.
Excellent. Good. There we go. A walk through blogging and microblogging with Mike Butcher and Helen Keegan. And it wouldn't be appropriate to leave this without actually you plugging your blogs at this stage, would it? So would you like to tell us where we can find out more?
Yes, you can find Musings of a Mobile Marketeer over at technokitten.com.
Technokitten.com, Mike?
And, TechCrunch UK can be found at uk.techcrunch.com, or just plug in techcrunch.co.uk.
Fantastic.